So, back in the day when I was a trial counsel in the turn of the century, we had an offense that was called adultery, right? And that was two married people have sexual intercourse as defined by penetration of the vagina by the penis of somebody who's not your spouse. That was a crime. Well, 2019, they changed the law, right?
They did.
What was that? How'd they change it?
So they changed it to extramarital sexual conduct, expanded the definition of what characterizes or what qualifies as a sexual conduct, and then allowed for a defense of legal separation. And so then it was not just between a man and a woman, penis and vagina, then expanded to different forms of sexual contact. And then now there's a defense so that individuals, sometimes in the military, it's difficult to get divorced. So they can be married for a long time, but then there's still that legal separation in place, but it wasn't actually through the court system legally. And so that at that point, that wasn't a defense. But then now, if someone's gone through the process to get a legal separation, then they can use that as a defense instead of, never until having the divorce is finalized and being able to engage in sexual activity with someone.
Right. And so back when dinosaurs walked the earth and adultery was a crime, right? When I first started practicing, in the late 90s in the military, there was actually no defenses whatsoever, right?
Correct.
It was, if you had an affair, it was against the rules. And then, I don't remember when, but there was a change, I want to say 2010-ish. I could have the dates wrong, I don't know. But they then said, no, it's not just the fact that you had sex with someone other than your spouse. It had to meet these other criteria, right? It had to have an effect on the unit, and it had to have been open and notorious. And there were like 6 factors that were also things that you had to consider to say whether or not that particular act was in fact against the rules, right? And so after that, then it was more of a burden for the government to show, hey, this, not only did this happen, but here's why it's bad, right? In practicality, it didn't matter, right? I mean, in the way we did our business, whether it was a GOMAR or anything else, nobody was saying, oh, well, he did have sex with someone else or she had sex with someone else other than their spouse, but since no one knew about it and it didn't affect the unit, so we're going to let it go. That never happened, right? Even though that's what the law said. Mm-hmm. And I've never seen in my military career someone get court-martialed for adultery or extramarital sexual conduct. It's usually an add-on.
Exactly. The government adds it on so that if they can't prove like that there was a sexual assault or some other offense, they prove that there was at least that sexual conduct between the two parties, that one that's married, that's not the spouse, and then they've at least got a conviction on that charge.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about that, right? When I was a special victim prosecutor, I took the position of never charge adultery on a rape because it implies that there was some consensual nature to that act. And I don't want to give those members any ideas that this was a consensual act. So, I've never understood the government's charging decision to do that, right? They weaken their case by diluting it with some of these lesser offenses that really frankly give the members a way out when they don't want to make a hard decision.
Exactly. In the places that I practice at, they were always adding it as an additional offense. Right.
Well, it's 2 different theories of how to practice law, right? But from defending people with this, who's charged with it, right? It's more than just having committed the act, right? You've got to have committed the act. You've got to have committed one of these aggravating factors of what I call it. And then, you have to look at the totality of the circumstances, right? So let's say you don't have a legal separation, but you've been separated for 4 years. Your wife's got a boyfriend living, or your husband's got a girlfriend living with him for the last 2 years who's a civilian. You have separate bank accounts. You maintain separate lives, separate jobs, no kids. Is that adultery?
That's where we look at that prejudicial to good order and discipline and service discrediting.
Right? Is that extramarital sexual conduct? Right? So it's not a black and white issue. A lot of commanders in the military see it black and white. And all they say is, you're married, you had sexual contact with someone not your spouse, you're guilty. And that's just not it. There's a lot more nuance that goes into it. Now, look, if you're a commander and you deploy one of your soldiers downrange, and then you have sex with his wife, that's no bueno, right? That is why we have these type of rules in the military. That's why adultery is so pervasive, or extramarital sexual conduct, because we as commanders can control our subordinates and control people to get them to the field or send them on a mission so that we can make their spouses vulnerable. In that instance, really bad stuff. But in the instance where you've got a marriage that's been broken for several years and each party has gone on about their lives, but they haven't formalized it, I'm not sure that should be criminalized, in my opinion.
And that's where we got to look at the specific facts, understand the totality of the circumstances to see then if it rises to the level, or how we can defend to say, okay, no, this situation should not be criminalized, and our belief is not criminalized and does not meet the definition of extramarital sexual conduct.
Right, and that takes a lot of effort, right? Because you have to look into it, you have to do the examination, you have to talk to a lot of people in the unit. I mean, but if nobody knows about it, how can it be a service discrediting or prejudicial good order and discipline, right?
That's a very good point.
If no one knows about it, it can't be bad. But, these are some of the things that we can do when representing somebody charged with extramarital sexual conduct, looking at these factors. The problem is, it's never a standalone offense.
Correct.
It's always accompanied with something else, at least in my experience. Now, that investigation that starts off because you've got somebody upset that you've had extramarital sexual conduct with someone, or a third party reports it, that may start off just examining that, but it's always going to uncover something else. It's very rare that somebody is facing a single sole specification of extramarital sexual conduct. It does happen, but it's quite rare. If you've been separated from your spouse, or if you're facing extramarital sexual conduct, give us a call. We're the law office of William Hellickson. We are your warrior advocates. You defend the nation. We defend you.